Some deals change the world quietly, behind closed doors. In the world of global business, the most transformative agreements are often the ones we never see. They're not announced with fanfare or celebrated with parades. Instead, they're forged in hushed meetings, sealed with a handshake, and kept out of the public eye. These silent pacts can shape the destiny of entire industries, and even nations. Apple's partnership with China is one of the most consequential of these hidden alliances. It's a relationship that has quietly redefined the landscape of technology, manufacturing, and international trade over the past 2 decades. While the world marveled at Apple's innovation, few realized just how deeply the company's fortunes became intertwined with China's rise as a global powerhouse. This alliance put iPhones in billions of hands, making Apple a household name from New York to Shanghai, from London to Mumbai. The sleek devices became symbols of status, creativity, and connection, all thanks to a supply chain that spanned continents and a market that seemed limitless. In return, China became the world's factory, producing not just iPhones but the very backbone of the modern digital age. Millions of workers found employment, entire cities were transformed, and China's economy surged forward, powered by the relentless demand for Apple's products. This partnership fueled a trillion-dollar economic engine, driving growth on both sides of the Pacific. Apple's profits soared, and China's cities glittered with new wealth. The world watched as two giants, one corporate, one national, lifted each other to unprecedented heights. But today, that once solid foundation is shaking. The world is changing, and the forces that once brought Apple and China together are now pulling them apart. Economic uncertainty, shifting consumer trends, and the specter of global conflict have cast a shadow over this once unbreakable bond. Geopolitical tensions are turning this once symbiotic relationship into a source of risk. Trade wars, sanctions, and political posturing have made it clear. What was once a win-win is now a high-stakes gamble. Apple's future, and the future of global tech, now hangs in the balance between Washington and Beijing. Every headline, every policy shift, every diplomatic spat sends ripples through the world's most valuable company and the global economy it anchors. The decisions made by Tim Cook and Xi Jinping will ripple across the globe, affecting everything from your next phone to the fate of international trade. Their choices could determine whether the world remains connected or fractures into competing tech spheres. As Apple scrambles to reduce its dependency on China, shifting production to countries like Vietnam and India, the world is watching. Can Apple truly break free from China's manufacturing might? Or is the bond too deep to sever without consequences? And what does this challenge reveal about the new era of global power? Are we witnessing the end of an era of cooperation, or the birth of a new, more complex world order, where technology, politics, and economics are forever intertwined? This is the untold story of Apple's silent pact with China, and why its unraveling could change everything. The next chapter in global tech history is being written right now, and its outcome will shape the world for generations to come. Apple's story begins in the most unassuming of places, a small, cluttered garage in Los Altos, California, in 1976. Here, 2 young visionaries, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, tinkered late into the night, driven by a dream to make computers accessible to everyone. Their first creation, the Apple I, was hand-built piece by piece on a simple workbench. This humble setting would become the birthplace of a revolution that would change the way the world interacts with technology. The Apple II soon followed, becoming a symbol of American innovation and entrepreneurial spirit. It wasn't just a computer, it was a statement that technology could be personal, creative, and empowering. For years, Apple's computers were not only designed, but also assembled in the United States. Skilled American workers put together each machine, and the company's roots in Silicon Valley became legendary. But as the 1980s gave way to the 1990s, the landscape began to shift. Rising labor costs, increasing competition, and the need for greater scale forced Apple to reconsider its approach to manufacturing. Enter Tim Cook, a logistics mastermind who would later become Apple's CEO. Cook saw that to survive and thrive, Apple needed to look beyond America's borders for manufacturing solutions. China emerged as the answer. Unlike anywhere else, China offered a vast, highly disciplined workforce, and local governments eager to attract foreign investment. The scale and speed at which Chinese factories could operate were simply unmatched. The turning point came in 2001 with the launch of the iPod. Its explosive success meant Apple needed to produce millions of devices quickly and efficiently. Chinese factories, with their ability to ramp up production overnight, became indispensable partners. At Foxconn and other massive facilities, thousands of workers could be mobilized at a moment's notice, working around the clock to meet Apple's famously exacting standards for quality and precision. By the time the iPhone launched in 2007, the decision was clear. Apple's future would be built in China. The partnership was no longer just a business strategy, it was the foundation of Apple's global dominance. But this shift wasn't just about finding cheaper labor, it was about tapping into a manufacturing ecosystem that could innovate, adapt, and deliver at a scale the world had never seen before. China's dense network of suppliers, component makers, and logistics hubs created a hyper-efficient supply chain. Parts could be sourced, assembled, and shipped with astonishing speed, allowing Apple to launch new products globally with flawless timing. The formula was simple but powerful. Apple provided the design, vision, and brand. China provided the muscle, scale, and speed. Together they forged a manufacturing powerhouse that set new standards for the entire tech industry. This partnership didn't just build devices, it built a global supply chain that changed the world, making cutting-edge technology accessible to millions. Yet, this perfect match came with hidden costs, environmental challenges, labor controversies, and a growing dependence on a single country. The story of Apple's rise is also a story of the complex, sometimes uneasy, relationship between innovation and globalization. Foxconn, Apple's chief assembly partner, became the architect of this manufacturing miracle. Its factory cities like Longhua in Shenzhen housed hundreds of thousands of workers, operating around the clock. Workers lived in dorms, worked long shifts, and performed repetitive tasks with astonishing speed. Foxconn's ability to hire and mobilize massive labor forces gave Apple a critical edge. The Chinese government fueled this system, offering land, infrastructure, and billions in incentives. Apple's production needs became a national priority, creating the most efficient manufacturing operation in history. This engine powered Apple's rise to a trillion-dollar company. But it relied on fragile conditions and immense human pressure. Apple's China strategy delivered unmatched efficiency and profits, but at a cost. The entire supply chain was in China. Need a million screws? They're a floor below. Need a change? Factories adapt in hours. This deep integration made Apple and China codependent. Over 90% of iPhones are still assembled in China, which is also Apple's third largest market. This dual dependency gives Beijing enormous leverage. Any disruption, pandemic, disaster, or political crackdown threatens Apple's entire operation. COVID-19 lockdowns in Zhengzhou cost Apple billions and exposed its vulnerability. The golden cage of efficiency became a trap. Apple's greatest strength had become its biggest risk. Apple's success in China came with a human cost. Reports of harsh working conditions, excessive overtime, and even suicides at Foxconn drew global outrage. Apple responded with audits and reforms, but critics say the core model, millions of low-cost workers under pressure, remains. Meanwhile, Apple faces political pressure, hosting Chinese user data on state servers and removing apps at Beijing's request. The company's balancing act between profit and principle is under constant scrutiny. The era of easy globalization is over. The US and China are now locked in a tech Cold War. Tariffs, export controls, and sanctions have turned the supply chain into a battleground. Apple faces pressure in the US to decouple from China, while in China, it risks nationalist backlash and government retaliation. The stable environment that fueled Apple's rise has vanished. Now, every move is fraught with risk, political, economic, and existential. The trillion-dollar handshake is threatened by the clenched fists of two superpowers. Apple must urgently rethink its global strategy. To reduce risk, Apple is diversifying its manufacturing, slowly. Vietnam has become a hub for AirPods and iPads thanks to its proximity to China's supply chain. But Vietnam is small, it can't match China's scale. India, with over 1 billion people, is Apple's best hope for a true alternative. Apple is ramping up iPhone production and opening stores in India, lured by government incentives. Yet building a new ecosystem is slow and difficult. Infrastructure, logistics, and skilled labor remain challenges. Experts say it could take a decade to move even a quarter of iPhone production out of China. The pivot is real, but painfully slow. Apple now walks a tightrope between two worlds, each with its own set of expectations, demands, and risks. The company's every step is watched closely, as it tries to maintain its footing in a landscape that is constantly shifting beneath it. In the United States, Apple faces mounting pressure to prove its loyalty to American values and interests. Lawmakers and the public alike are urging the company to reduce its reliance on China for manufacturing and supply chains, especially as tensions between the two countries escalate. There are calls for Apple to bring jobs back home, to invest more in American workers, and to ensure that its products are secure from foreign influence. Meanwhile, in China, Apple must tread carefully to avoid angering the government or jeopardizing its access to one of the world's largest and most lucrative markets. The Chinese authorities scrutinize every move Apple makes, from the apps it allows on its devices to the data it stores and the partnerships it forms. Any misstep could result in swift retaliation, from regulatory crackdowns to public backlash. If Apple moves too quickly to distance itself from China, it risks provoking a response that could threaten its business operations, supply chains, and customer base in the region. But if it moves too slowly, it faces criticism and potential punishment from the US government, which is increasingly wary of American companies' ties to China. The stakes are high and the margin for error is razor thin. Apple is striving to be both a symbol of American innovation and a pragmatic, adaptable partner in China. It wants to represent the best of Silicon Valley while also respecting the realities of doing business in a globalized world. For years, globalization allowed these dual identities to coexist, enabling Apple to thrive by bridging East and West. But now, as geopolitical tensions rise and national interests take center stage, these identities are increasingly in conflict, forcing Apple to make difficult choices. The pressure to pick a side is growing, with both governments and consumers demanding clarity and commitment. Apple's decisions today will shape not only its own future, but also the broader relationship between the world's two largest economies. The company's balancing act is more precarious than ever before. Every choice carries risks, and the consequences of a misstep could be profound, affecting millions of customers, employees, and partners around the globe. The world is watching closely to see if Apple can keep its balance, or if the pressures of navigating two worlds will finally tip the scales. Apple's China crisis is a symbol of the end of globalization as we knew it. National security now trumps business logic. Governments are forcing companies to pick sides. The era of cheap, powerful electronics may be ending as supply chains fragment and costs rise. The digital world itself could split, different rules, apps, and freedoms depending on where you live. Apple's struggle is a preview of what's coming for global business. Its choices will shape the world we inherit. What do you think Apple should do? Let us know in the comments. For more stories on the forces shaping our world, subscribe and turn on notifications.